My name is Patricia Lapointe, and I have more than 15 years of working experience in development projects. And today we are going to talk about how to dealing with uncertainties in development projects and how we can explore agile tools and techniques. So the learning objective of this webinar is first and foremost, do a quick recap in introducing key concepts and components of project management. We're going to compare what is waterfall and agile project management approaches. And we're going to share how in your development project today, you can start using agile tools and technique to deal with uncertainties. We're going to as well present virtual tools that can help you assist you manage your project on a daily basis. So what is a project? I will go very quickly on the basic. A project is a temporary endeavor taken to create a unique product or service. So it's limited in time with a certain budget and a clear objective. We know as well that more and more in development projects, we are talking about development programs, which are much more structured, where we have a number of sub-projects having a common goal towards a program. And what is project management? Is the ability, the knowledge, the skill, and the tools and technique to manage your project, achieve its goal. In any situation, there's many reasons why a project can arise. It could be a need or a gap that is found in the society in terms of economic or social issue. It could be a crisis. Certain situation could create, for example, difficulty in accessing the city center or having high level of traffic and losing momentum in terms of having the residents moving to the city center could create the essence of a project such as public transport, train, and things like that. It could be as well new technology, 5Gs, a few years back was installing VSAT, or technology change, and the evolution of that technology could create a need for a new project. And of course, it could be as well an opportunity in funding. You have World Bank or any organization willing to fund in climate change or diverse initiative, and that could be an opportunities for you to develop a project for that purpose. So once you have defined what is the reason, the origin of your project, you need to define what is your intended purpose or your result, your end goal. When you have your end goal in mind, you can define what are your project objective, who will be working on the project, human resources, stakeholders involved, as well as material and a start to end systematic approach, which is what we call as well the planning, from a planning phase with a project plan. Any project in Agile or in Waterfall, we call the golden triangle of project management. We always have constraints, and those constraints will be time, cost, quality, and we very importantly need to think about the scope of a project. In certain situations, you might decide, if time is a great deal of an issue, you might decide to reduce your scope. What is your scope? The scope is the boundaries or limitation in which your project will operate. Is it, will you be building 10 schools in a state or a province, or will you be building only 2? Will you be extent of the project could be also teacher training, could be providing a computer for children and things like that. So scope is really the limitation and what is part of your project and what is not. So keep in mind that even if we're using the waterfall or the Agile, these constraints always are key elements in deciding how to deal with your project. So we know about the knowledge area. So any project, we should take into account, yes, the scope, the cost, the time, the quality, as we mentioned during the constraint, but there's also another side, which is thinking about the risk involved. All the risk management, being proactive and foreseeing those risks. You're going to have to think about who will be working the project. So human resources is also a key. We have seen that several projects have been facing difficulties or even had to stop based on poor or lack of stakeholder management. We know that our stakeholder management is key element in managing project, those that are involved directly or indirectly in your project, and might change. Stakeholders are also individuals or organizations that can change along your project, so you might need to monitor them throughout your project lifecycle. Communication is key, especially in this day and age. We are communicating online, physically, with the stakeholder, but also with our beneficiaries. Are you informing the public on how your project is progressing? Are you communicating with your sponsor or your project director and partners? And of course, one key element will be procurement. When every project, we need to purchase goods and services, and we need to apply a high level of integrity and following compliances in terms of practice of good procurement practices. So we know a project is limited in time, it has limited duration, limited budget. But when should we use Waterfall or when should we use Agile? Typical project management in development project, we will be using Waterfall methodology. So what is the Waterfall methodology? The Waterfall methodology is based on the concept that you have a project lifecycle with 5 phases. Keep in mind that in the literature, you might see organization or different companies to look at in 4 phases and things like that. But in general, we are referring to 5 phases of the project lifecycle. The first one will be initiating. Second is planning, executing, monitoring and control that will cross across the project lifecycle. We also sometimes see it under the name of monitor and evaluation, and the closing phase. So when we are in the waterfall approach, we have a really diligent methodology in terms of initiating, defining the project scope, understanding the needs of our beneficiaries or our residents, depending on the nature of your project, and really establishing your project charter. So when we work with development project where we have funding by World Bank, African Development Bank, or even the Asian Development Bank, we will be using the waterfall technique. Why? Because projects are complex, involve many organizations, and often require a lot of documentation and planning. So one of the key elements of the waterfall would be how to plan the project. And of course, when you plan your project, you'll need to think about what are the objectives, what are the timeline. You're going to create your Gantt chart, define the risks, define how you're managing your stakeholder throughout your, and then you'll create what we call the project implementation plan. The project implementation plan needs to be approved by your partner, especially the funder, in terms of leading your project throughout your journey. And then you'll be required to execute and monitor those deliverables throughout your project lifecycle. And finally, closing. Closing will be also means final handover. Are you an agency that manages a project on behalf of a ministry, which you'll be giving back, maybe an infrastructure, or you're part of a ministry and now we need to think about how this infrastructure you have built for a certain project needs to be managed, so on and so forth. So the closing phase is also very important because we look at how do we give back the result that we have achieved, how do we close financial accounts and budget, and as well, how do we explore lesson learned on the project. So when we are doing waterfall, there's many planning and many tools that exist, which is really about project designing, analyzing our environment, with our stakeholder analysis. Maybe you're going to use your SWOT or PESTLE technique. PESTLE stands for political, economical, sociological, technological, environmental, and legal. But it's a way and a tool to look at what is happening externally to my project, and those factors might impact my project. We often talk about logical framework, or even recently in the recent years, World Bank referred to the result framework, where we look at what is our project, why are we doing it, how are we doing it, and which with fun. So logical framework allow us to get a summary of our project basically in 1 or 2 page, and is a very good communication tool to talk with your different stakeholders about why am I doing this and what is the purpose I'm trying to achieve 5 years from the beginning of the project. An element that is also discussed and shared through the logical framework will be critical assumptions. So those are elements out of your control, but necessary to achieve your project goals. So in a waterfall, we are really having that proactive mindset. We are trying to anticipate things that might happen in the long term throughout the project. And we use all sorts of tools and techniques to do that planning, forward planning. The work breakdown structure is also known, and one of the favorite tools, according to a survey conducted with project managers. The work breakdown structure allows us to break down a big component of your project in smaller, feasible tasks. So it allows you to really break it down and be more manageable. So when you break down your project in small parts, it also means that you can delegate your team members to be assigned to different work package. The work package will help us define what is the cost, what is the time required, what is the baseline, and really is the foundation to coming up with our project plan. So a typical waterfall project plan will be having a typical MS project or any other form of visual representation. It can be done in Excel or any tools. We are not associated with any software company for this webinar, so you can choose open source or any other ways. But usually at the end of all this planning, you will get your project plan or your project implementation plan that your team will be following the task through the monitoring and controlling phase, ensuring that we are on time, on schedule, and on budget. But what about Agile? So Agile technique is something that we've been hearing a lot for the past 20 years. It has been it's a technique that has been put in place to create software, and the waterfall technique felt that was not the right way to deal with such software projects. So in a nutshell, what is Agile? Is an iterative approach to project management. It really helps us to focus on the result. In this case, for software development is often, what is the goal for customers? Is our software working? It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to take a long time, but how can we get quickly a beta version? How can we have a basic working version that we can get feedback from our customers? So it really means about quick change, small change, and being very adaptive in the process of achieving your goal. So what it means is that the team is always required to reevaluate, are they on track in terms of achieving smaller goals throughout the journey. So there's not necessarily in an Agile methodology, there's not going to be a project plan for 5 years. We will see they have sprint for a 2 weeks to a 4 weeks journey, and they're looking at a much shorter time period. So how this Agile manifesto was created with a group of software engineers that decided that we should introduce this new technique for software. Interestingly, in the last few years, we are looking at how we can use Agile technique, not only for software, but for our traditional projects. So we might, in our development project, continue with having the planning, but we can integrate some of the tools and techniques from Agile to dynamize, make a project team much more dynamic and really help the team achieve their goal, especially in this time where there's a lot of uncertainties about health situation. How can we deal quickly? And really also, it could be a technique to really create a new motivation for your team. So what is Agile? Before we look at the hybrid models, which is introducing Agile technique to development project, let's just make sure we really understand what is Agile. So basically, Agile is an approach, as I mentioned, from the software companies. And we will see that Agile focus much more on the individual and the interaction within the group versus processes and tools when we saw in Waterfall project management. In the software or Agile technique, we're looking for working software. So that means we need to quickly have a working model that works and is either a beta version so we can launch and show it to potential customers. Whereas the Waterfall technique, we need to have comprehensive documentation. We need approval from our own internal ministry or organization. We need approval or no objection from our development partners that are funding or loaning the money. So there's a lot more documentation that needs to be done in order to be able to start to execute. For Agile, we're looking a lot more closer to customer collaboration. As I mentioned, you want to know quickly the feedback from your customers. So that means even though it's not a perfect product, you'll go and do focus group or ask people to try use it so you can get their feedback and improve instantly. Whereas in Waterfall, we're looking at contract negotiation, right? We need our project appraisal documents signed. We need good procurement processes with contracts with our different vendors or providers, a consultancy firm being also even engineer or law firm or even architects. So you have a lot more contracts to be planned and determined. If finally, one of the key elements of Agile is responding to change. We need to adapt very quickly. If we see that our beta version is not working or is not providing the customer experience that people are willing to pay, you definitely need to change. Whereas in Waterfall approach, our approach is to stick to the plan. And everything we do is to bring us back on the plan. Of course, in Waterfall project is both techniques are good techniques and they just apply in different contexts. But if you're following the plan, that means you have defined a direction, a goal, objective, and maybe you have found some issues or delays in achieving your plan. So you have, as a project manager and your team, make decision on how can we get back into plan. So if there's delay, if there's cost increase, do we reduce the scope to manage within the budget? If there's delay, do we decide to outsource some of the tasks or bring in more worker on the site to make sure that we can reduce the delays? So the decisions that needs to be made may be for similar purposes, but with a very different time frame. But what are Agile techniques and how can you use them in your project development plan? So here's 4 techniques that you should definitely consider for your projects. First and foremost is the huddle meeting with 30 minutes every day. Depending on your situation, we have seen worldwide, teams are changing from working fully physically to working fully virtual. And now in the past year, we are seeing a hybrid version of that, meaning some people are in office where others are in working from home or working virtually from different locations in the world. So what is a huddle meeting? This is a great technique from Agile that you can adapt. So you might have a lot of deliverables to do, but a huddle meeting is basically a quick 30-minute meeting that can be done virtually or physically. They even recommend, according to Agile technique, that it should be a standing meeting where quickly you ask to do a round table. So every team member must share their progress where they're at, but also what are the challenges and the barriers that they face. It is a quick way to kind of keep your momentum in your team. If huddle, they recommend once a day. I've seen different groups finding that once a day might be too much. So you can choose to have it twice a week, but the idea is really not delaying those meetings, but really regularly having a quick update on what your team member is doing, and really give not the project manager to be the one leading this huddle, but really let your team member from the various expertise, being technical, being monitoring specialist, procurement specialist, update the team member. The reason we say also 30-minute and regularly, the idea is to really avoid at all costs the long 2-3 hours meeting that we do once a week, where we lose people's attention. So if the meetings are smaller and more regular, people are quite keep it updated on what's happening, and you don't need to block such a long time. So people are really, and you also feel your team member feel that they have to act now. If they have a meeting only next week, they probably have the time to do it and really, take longer than they should. So if you regularly encourage your team, they might act faster on certain small tasks that are required. We're going to see in further detail in another slide what is a Scrum board. But actually, a Scrum board is really a visual tool to see who's working on what and what are you working. Are you in progress, or like what to do, what is in progress, and what is completed. And it's a really good way for your team to see who's working on what, and it can be a really motivation for your team members to say, oh, okay, I've seen this person completed a few of their tasks, I also gonna really try to achieve mine. Okay, it's not about a competition, it's really creating that visual to see what everyone is working on. And when you do your Scrum, and we're going to see as well the other technique, which is called Kanban, you are going to use your planning for a 2-week sprint. So we are not planning for the next year. We're not planning for the next 5 years. We're really planning for the next 2 to 4 weeks, which we call sprint. So what are the things you need to do in order to kickstart some of your tasks in order to achieve your deliverable? So this is also a nice way that you could have your full project plan approved by your development partner, and ask your team to have quite short sprint of 2 to 4 weeks to really keep people on track and with the momentum. One key element in Agile is how to deal with backlog, meaning items that are not progressing. Maybe you're waiting for no objection, and the no objection has been giving you delay in so many tasks. So what can we do to unlock this? So really, you'll see that the project manager in Agile technique is really the one that is trying to unlock all those barriers. He's going to ask his team member, what is blocking you from progressing today? Is there anything, do I need to nudge the team leader at the World Bank or any other development partner? Do I need to nudge the ministry and things like that? So the project manager becomes someone that is facilitating this stakeholder management communication that might create a backlog for the project. So here is the timeline for Scrum framework, which is basically the team identify what they need to do. So sprint planning. So you look back, okay, so imagine this is your first sprint of 2 to 4 weeks, depending on your project or your team. You're doing a sprint planning. So you decide on what needs to be included in the sprint. So what are the tasks that you would like to work on? And the team will use the Scrum board to present visually what they're working on. You'll have your huddle, your daily meetup, and you're going to have the sprint review. And you see through the Scrum board what is moving and what is not. When you're coming back to your second round of a sprint, that's where you're going to look at your backlog. What happened in the last 2 to 4 weeks that we were not able to progress and why? This is what we call the backlog. Tasks that were not being able to be achieved for XYZ reason, and now we need to solve a solution to really push the process. If anyone have any question at this point, please feel free to ask at any point throughout this webinar, or raise your virtual hand. I will be happy to answer. Otherwise, I'm happy to also open for Q&A at the end of the session. All right, so here's a look at a Scrum technique. Scrum technique is basically identifying maybe your first time that you're doing your sprint planning. You might not have a backlog, but forward on, you might have tasks that were not being able. So you want to identify for the next 2 weeks, for the next 4 weeks, what needs to be done. So that will be your to-do list. And you should really have accountability on the names, who will be responsible to be doing that task. So in a way, you could even do a color system, or so the blue is one of your team members, the red, and so on and so forth. So we identify quickly what is to do. As you're moving towards the execution in your sprint, you can move your tasks, your post-it from the to-do to in progress. So it signals all team members that someone is working on that particular deliverable. And when it's completed, the person or the team member can move it to done. So we can see the progress throughout the week, which one are slowly not getting done as fast as anticipating. And this will create our backlog for the first virtual loop. So Scrum technique is something that can be done virtually. There's a lot of virtual tools as well. But if you are working physically, it is a good way to show it where your team works. I've seen it in situations where people have their Scrum board really on the whiteboard. Basically, they use the markers and post-it note, and they say, okay, this is the Scrum for the next 2 weeks. And people really go to it, drink their coffee or tea, looking at what is progressing and what is not. And even though you're in a development project with a complex plan, you can definitely integrate this Scrum technique to your project team and really energize your team members on what needs to be done. It is a real motivator, and as well, you can see where is the real barrier to the progress. Another technique, this one, Kanban, is very similar in design, but this one was created by the Japanese, and it was really Kanban board were introduced in the manufacturing sectors way back in a way to really visualize and see progress over time. Okay, so very similar technique. Maybe one more thing about the Scrum is usually in the Scrum technique, you will have a Scrum Master. So one person in charge of the board who will lead writing and planning. You might have the product manager. In this case, it could be your technical team that could be giving back on some insights on what needs to be on the board. So we saw the huddle technique, we saw the Scrum technique. So we see that these two techniques can definitely be used and implemented in the Waterfall project. Again, I recall that what we're trying to do here is not an either or approach, but we're trying to integrate a hybrid model, integrating Agile technique to a Waterfall complex planning project, right? So using these techniques will really help your team to be dealing with uncertainties, dealing with things that are changing a lot faster than before, right? Before we could say, oh, we don't know, like we can anticipate the risks, anticipate challenges, but we have seen in the past 2 years, technology is evolving much faster, uncertainties with the health, external factors, being the pandemic, but also other issues such as the war in Ukraine. A lot of things are really out of our control. So those external factors create uncertainties in the realization of our project. So using Agile technique could be a solution in order to overcome this gap and challenge it. So again, in a nutshell, just keeping quickly reminding everyone what is the difference between traditional and agile. So in traditional approach, it's a linear approach, so it's slowly progressing over time, whereas agile is iterative. We are changing and progressing as we go. Traditional approach are usually used for large and complex projects. We see agile technique used usually more for startup company, software developer, new app, a company that wants to create a new app. So usually for small to medium scale. The requirements for the user are different. So for traditional approach, we're looking at clearly define what is our project goal, what do you want to achieve, what is the budget, and so on. Whereas the agile approach, we might, change some of these constraints along the way. Maybe we might change the product completely from the time we started till the end. The actual product, maybe you were creating an app to sell food or deliver food package to, and then in the end you become a platform that not only sell food but also help getting groceries and so on and so forth. So it's really changing the inputs but also the end result. In our traditional approach, we know our beneficiaries or clients or partners, their involvement is lower, meaning that we should still consult them through a stakeholder management exercise and understanding the needs of our beneficiaries or the resident. Whereas the agile approach is really about having focus group working closely with them. The development model, we saw that it was project life cycle with 5 phases, whereas in agile is a sprint that we keep going back with 2 to 4 weeks. So it's evolutionary in nature. We change as we're progressing. Maybe the need and the scope of work might change. What do you do when you have issue in terms of escalation to higher managers? So in the traditional approach, you will definitely speak to your higher manager when the problem arises. Whereas in Agile, we see how the team can find a solution and resolve it. Of course, the role of the manager here is really to help as well, take away the barrier, but there's that sentiment or the consensus that the project team members are also responsible in solving all the issues that they foresee. As I mentioned, the model for traditional is anticipation. We really are proactively looking at what might come up. We're doing scenario-based analysis. We are proactive. We're doing, here's the potential risk, the medium, the high, the low, which one has more likelihood of happening, and so on and so forth. Where in the Agile approach, we're really about how, if anything happened, how can I adapt from there? So really a different mindset. Given those differences, the idea that we're discussing today is how we can embrace some of the Agile approach to your traditional project. Lastly, I would like to address some of the virtual tools. Again, I repeat, we are not associated with any software companies. This is just a way to show you an umbrella of virtual tools that are available for free or not for you to manage your project, and can really help you using to use Agile in your project. So of course, for file sharing, you could use the Google Drive or the Dropbox, or even now we have Microsoft Teams that does a really good job. In terms of communication, we see that Zoom, Skype, Google Meet, WhatsApp and Microsoft Teams are really all these virtual tools that allow you to communicate with your team members. So if you need to do virtual huddle, these are a platform that you could use to communicate with your team. Each have advantages and limitations. So you can explore which of the platform you prefer. We can continue as well with daily work with our different Office suite, being Microsoft, being Google Suite, or even I've seen in certain part of the world that WhatsApp has been the way people communicate for work. For time management, there's Zapier and TimeCam that can help you see where you're identify your backlog, which processes take longer. When you, for example, where can you try to solve time? You could plan your procurement process and say, okay, usually our average is 3 to 5 months. How can we make that timeline reduce in order to be much more efficient on the job? Interestingly, we have seen as well a lot more new collaborative tools, such as Miro board, which are whiteboards that can be used virtually, and where you can have a few of your team members working on the same project plan or same design, or even your slide for presentation, really having that collaborative element, working on documents. So there's Miro, there's Jamboard, there's Concept Board, and Lucidchart. Those are options you could explore. And in terms of project management tools, there's a lot out there. Some have basic function for free, and then higher premium visual and tools and technique if you use a premium version. So some of them are Slack, Jira Software. There's also Mondays that I haven't put there. Your Proof Hub, Asana, and Trello. So there's really a lot of tools and technique to make your project team communicate, do things differently. And you can use some of these technique or virtual tools to implement some of your new Agile technique. Lastly, I would like to share with you a technique, the software Trello. Trello is a way to have your Scrum board, but virtually. So you can have your to-do list and you can assign your team members to that to-do list. And when they are actually doing, they individually can take their cards, their cards from to do to doing and to done or completed. You could also assign some of the cards to your team members. If you're a big team, you could say, okay, George, can you work on the RFP document? Someone else could be planning the meeting for opening of the bids and things, so on and so forth. So you can assign some of those tasks. The advantage of this board is that you can really have a good visual, and is also usable on your online, on your laptop or a PC, or also there's an app version where you can update regularly. So if your team has to go regularly on the ground, they can easily update their Trello or their Scrum board wherever they are in the application. Interestingly as well, if you need to keep receipt or things, collect photos of the project progression. You've been on a site visit, you're looking at what has been achieved. Trello allows you to upload, to take picture or documents to upload and attach to the cards that you're working on. So when you say completed, you could decide to say, here's the document that was completed and approved and things like that, or that was discussed among team members. And here's the picture of maybe the training that happened that was completed, or the site visit, some of the latest advancement on the building of an infrastructure. Or share receipt. Here's the gas, petrol receipt that you need to keep in terms of your claims. All right. So Trello or using Scrum or Kanban is really this methodology to work on the to-do, doing, and done workflow. It allows you to create visibility, improve efficiency, increase productivity of your team, effective collaboration. So really creating that group dynamic or team dynamic that we're working on a project together. So driving transparency, you know who's working on what, and you can reach out to any of your team member if you feel that they're falling behind on certain of the, so, and really a stronger project team or company culture. So using hybrid technique for your development project are definitely things that you should think about implementing. It will not take away any of your waterfall technique, all your planning, all your Gantt chart and risk and all that, but it will help you dynamize your team and make it really interesting. So I encourage you to combine hybrid techniques in dealing with uncertainty. So this is covered the end of my webinar this morning or today. I hope you enjoyed the session. I'm happy to take any question if there is any.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Jean-Michel Dagrave, Director of CETEM International. Thanks for putting the table, and now the discussions will be open. If you have any comments, questions about these new tools and techniques, and I think you've pointed out correctly at the end that it doesn't have to be a total revolution where you put aside everything that you have been doing for years and decades. It might be slight changes in order to apply a Kanban, adding a Kanban to your project management toolbox, and so on. So that can be a step-by-step approach where you add these various techniques and tools to try to make your project more successful in a way that you are more proactive. If I have to go back to the start of your webinar. Patricia, to your experience, because you mentioned previously that most of these tools and techniques come from the IT sector, correct? Which
Correct.
was dealing with more uncertainty in the development of their projects, because basically when we design, we have a general idea, but we don't know exactly what we're going to come up with, and so that needs more I don't know, readjustment along the way, and that's the point of these various tools and techniques. How these tools and techniques have so far been applied to, let's say, project finance by donors like the World Bank or the African Development Bank, for instance. Have you heard about any example, or it's not there? We're not there yet, or it's coming?
I think in nature, because of the financing, we still require the documentation, but I think we are hearing a lot more teams that are embracing the hybrid and integrating those techniques to really make it much, because there's so many uncertainties now that we're facing, right? External uncertainties that might make it, you have to adapt. We're talking about agility, but it's really that notion to adapt to things that are happening. So overnight, some of the staff could not work from office. They had to work virtually. So adapt quickly. You cannot go to your site. So having these huddles and things like that, we don't see so far. What I've experienced and see is that the donors are not financing projects fully designed in Agile as of yet, but really embracing this hybrid version, and that is really welcome. And I want to add on to one of the elements you share. The idea, why was it started with software and startup companies, is because you're aiming to do a product which they have a very different purpose. They want to sell a product, right? They want people willing to pay. So their original idea might realize that as they're implementing it, clients doesn't want to buy that particular product. So you have to adapt to your client needs. Whereas development project, we are having project that is for society, for good purpose. So maybe building infrastructure that needs complexity, you know, that cannot be adapt every week. You need to make sure that you've done your feasibility study, you have done your architecture, design, engineer are validating that. So that cannot be done in sprint, but the idea is to combine and really having that hybrid methodology.
Correct. And if there's something we can be sure is that uncertainty is not diminishing over time. We went from a 2 years pandemic, and in only a few days or weeks that went from a pandemic to a war, which is going to have a lot of consequences on not only Ukraine and Russia, but the whole world and agriculture, how the agriculture products will be produced, will be sent to other countries, and so on. So the uncertainty is certainly not diminishing over time. If there are no questions at this time, I could invite you, for those who are interested. At the end, Patricia, you just mentioned briefly a few tools that can be used, online tools, and those of you would like to explore more of these tools, and they are not hundreds but thousands of them, I could invite you to visit our website at cetim.com. And if you visit the section webinar, like you did to register for this morning webinar, you can put to your agenda another webinar that Patricia will present in only 2 or 3 weeks time, by mid-April, toolbox for efficiently managing projects virtually. So this webinar will specifically focus on the latest part of the discussion of this morning. Those who would like to have a greater idea of what tools could be offered to you. They are free tools. They are one that you have you can have a demo. They are one that you need to pay. Well, how can you make your choice among all of these? So just visit our website at cetim.com. And for those who would like to participate to one of our training sessions, you can again go to our website cetim.com, and in the section Find a Training Seminar, you can see the upcoming webinars, and these are divided by pool of expertise. So you can scroll for management of organization, project management, public governance, procurement, sustainable development, or choose to filter them by location, and from there you can access the overview of these training sessions and the location and dates which will take place in the upcoming weeks or months. Please just again visit our website at cetim.com and you can get more information, or just send us an email on the email cetim@cetim.com, and we will respond to you to give you more details with great pleasure. So thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, this morning, or this evening, depending on where you are located. Thank you very much, Patricia, for being with us this morning. That was very interesting, and we look forward to having another discussion on this virtual toolbox in the upcoming weeks.
Thanks. Bye-bye.